Hello again. In this podcast, I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of things I take with me when I go away. So if you are thinking of going off to photograph wildlife or some sort of other trip, just to give you some ideas, this is the kind of thing I take with me. And you may have seen my webinar recently, well, at least as I record this, where I talk about this kind of thing too. So I'm going to start with the camera. Now, obviously, what you take in terms of camera body and lenses, all of that depends on what you have. But I do recommend that you have sufficient lenses to cover what you need. So typically for wildlife, you're looking at a telephoto of some sort, at least up to 400mm. And if you want to do specialized photography, things like birds, those kind of animals, 600mm is better. But then you're generally talking much heavier lenses. You will more than likely need a tripod. So you need to make a call on what it is you're shooting, the kind of photographs you want to get, a lot of close-ups, or you want to do a lot of wides, and obviously what your budget is for either new gear or what you have available. And also consider second-hand gear. What I do if I look at second-hand lenses, I'll take my body, the main body I use with me. I prefer to go look at them in person, connect everything up and just do some test shots that I can then zoom in, at least in the back of the camera, to make sure that everything looks fine. So ideally you'd be shooting against a grid or something where you can very easily see distortions or any other problems caused by the lens. But I definitely recommend that. Having said all of that, you can get some good equipment secondhand. And if you've got a warranty, if you buy from a photography store or somewhere that offers a warranty, that's definitely worth investigating because you can save a lot of money going down that particular route. So what do I take with me? Well, I've got a 100 to 400mm Canon EF lens. It's one of the older 100 to 400s. I've had it over 20 years now, but that's absolutely my go-to lens. And I do periodically get it serviced, generally after a trip, or if I haven't used it for a while, I'll take some shots and make sure I'm happy with it. But I do get both my camera bodies and my key lenses serviced from time to time, usually once every year or so, depending on how often I've used them. But if I've been using them a lot, then it might be more frequent than that. So you have to make a call on that. So my recommendation is a decent telephoto. Up to 400 is good because you can hand hold a 400mm or a zoom that takes you up to 400, generally okay. Going beyond that, it's harder to hand hold the lens and camera combination, and then that gives you all sorts of problems when it comes to trying to shoot without any kind of blurring happening because of lens wobble. So that's my recommendation on the long side. On the short side, so if you want to do a lot of landscapes, that sort of thing, again, you might have your favorite lenses. Mine, I've got a 28-135. Again, it's an old lens that I had for a while, and it does get serviced every now and again. But that one is nice because it gives me a decent wide angle kind of range, and also a nice kind of telephoto that overlaps with my main telephoto. Another nice thing about that lens is it does have a macro capability. So I don't shoot a lot of macro, but every now and again it's nice to have that option if something presents itself. So they're the two main lenses that I use. I've got other lenses, but they're generally my go-to lenses. And if I've got the room and I can take them, I'll take other lenses. But they're my main lenses for wildlife photography. In terms of bodies, you may only have the one body, but if you've got two, that's good because you've got a backup. I use a Canon EOS 5DS. That's my primary body because it's a full frame, very high resolution images, and because I am shooting so that I can produce large prints of my work, I like to get the initial file as big as possible. My backup camera is a Canon EOS 7D Mark II. Now that's not a full frame, so that's a cropped frame. The advantage of that particular body is that the burst rate and burst period are both longer than on the 5DS. The 5DS being full frame, and I set my camera up to take the biggest possible image. You'll find, if you're not aware, on most cameras you can set the image or the file size that you want to save. So it depends on how you want to use the final image. So if you're only shooting for social media, you can get away with a small file size, which obviously means you can get more images on your SD card. Your burst speed, burst duration may be faster depending on the camera. So it's something to think about. If I'm photographing something like dolphins, I'll tend to use the 7D because it's much, much faster. The nice thing about using those two bodies is that the buttons and the arrangement of everything is pretty much the same. So I can pick one or other up and it's exactly the same to use, the way it's all set up. So, as I say, it depends on what bodies you've got available. You might want to consider buying a second body if you don't have one. Again, my recommendation would be to get something that is either the same as what you're already using or very similar. A couple of reasons for that. One I've already mentioned, in that switching between bodies, you don't have to think about what you're doing. Secondly, all of your lenses and anything else that you've got for your existing body should fit the new body. So you've got a direct one-for-one replacement there. So that's really the camera and lens part of it. So they're the most important parts. Thinking about batteries, again, I've used the battery extensions on the bodies that I have. So that means I have two normal Canon batteries in there. That does give me some redundancy. It gives me longer duration if I'm shooting a lot of images or shooting movie. If you're somewhere where you can't get the batteries recharged, I've tried a solar powered charger a few years ago in Namibia, and that really didn't work out terribly well. I do have a laptop with me and I've got a USB charger for my Canon batteries. So as a last resort, I can use the laptop as a source of charge to recharge my batteries. If I'm going to get stuck though, so climbing Kilimanjaro is one situation that springs to mind. I kept a couple of spare batteries with me. I only took one body with me because I was having to keep the weight down of what I was carrying. And I always kept one of the batteries within my clothing, so it was close to my body, so it was getting body heat. So if you're going somewhere where it's very cold, you might want to think about putting a spare battery somewhere where it can benefit from your body heat, because obviously, I say obviously, maybe you don't know, but batteries operate better when they're warm rather than when they're cold. And they're likely to retain their charge for longer and all this kind of stuff. So again, it's something to consider and look into. Thinking about what is in the camera body, another thing to think about are the memory cards. So definitely have said this before, but when I buy a body, I always get the biggest memory card it will support. I generally don't need to use a spare card. So both of the bodies I have will actually take two cards. They take an SD card and they take a flash drive. And depending on how I'm using it, I might either write the file to both cards. That's one of the options in the Canon, or just write to one card, which is, normally if you've only got the one card anyway. There are some advantages and disadvantages to that. The advantage is you've got a double, you've got two versions of the image. So if something goes wrong, you've got a backup image straight away. However, that is likely to increase the write time to the card. So that in turn limits your burst duration when you're trying to do a burst shot, which can be a problem. And you'll need to have a look and maybe check it out with your own camera. But there are pros and cons for both. Generally, what I do once I finish the shoot, and normally this will be every day, it isn't always, because if I'm away camping somewhere, then it might be a few days. But what I'll do is, as soon as I'm somewhere where I can sit down and use my laptop, and I've got a Surface Pro that I use, so it's relatively small, relatively light, and the one I've got has got a fair bit of memory in it, so I can use Photoshop and things like that on the fly. I back up everything, first of all, to the PC, and if I can leave the files there, I will, but sometimes I'm shooting usually I'm shooting quite a lot of files, so I obviously need the memory in the computer for other things. So what I carry with me are a couple of SSD drives, that's solid state drives, and the couple that I use are from Samsung. They're 1 terabyte drives, so they're pretty big. And the reason I use them, they're a bit more expensive than some of the portable hard drives you can get, but the reason is that, first of all, they're very small and they're very light. So I can easily just put them in a carry-on bag or just keep them safe. So very easy to use them in a situation where I'm moving around a bit. Secondly, being solid state, there's nothing to go wrong really. So I've been very pleased with them and I've used them a lot. So when I'm away, they tend to be the backup drives. And again, I might, if I can keep things on the laptop as well, I will, but often I don't have the room. And when the cards in the cameras get full, I'll just wipe them because everything's backed up on the hard drives, on the solid state drives. So I use the cards in the camera purely for acquisition. I know I've seen some people use them for permanent storage as well. I was with somebody who was doing this for underwater work. The problem is, if you start a dive and there's not that much room on the SD card, and this happened to somebody, I was talking to him about it, he had to abort the dive because obviously underwater you can't change cards. But that was the way that particular operation was working. So I personally disagree with that. If it was me, I would copy everything off the SD drive at the end of each day or each dive, if possible. Wipe the drive so that when you start a dive, you've got a clean, fresh card within the camera. So that would be my suggestion to you, to just use that as a discipline. Okay, so that is really the main things on the camera body itself. Now, the kind of things you might want to take with you, one thing I found very useful is a splash cover. So this is one of those, mine's from Aquatech. It's designed to fit over my long lens and the body and just keep water off everything. Now, I've used it on a boat a few times, but where I found it really useful is actually in very dusty environments, because I had a situation a few years ago now where I was in Tanzania, and fortunately it was only on the very final day of the trip, but I kept getting a warning message up to say that the camera body couldn't connect to the lens. So there was a communications error. And what it was dust, because you get this very, very fine dust and it will just get absolutely everywhere. And it had got into the electrical connectors between the camera body and the lens. So all I could do was to, within the four-wheel drive I was in, trying to keep any other dust from getting in, quickly clean the contacts, reconnect everything, and then I'd get a few more shots and then I'd get the same error. So by using this splash cover, it's been an absolute godsend for that kind of environment. So do have a think about that. And obviously when you are changing lenses, try, minimize when you do that if you're in that kind of environment. This is where having a second body can come in really handy, because you can have a long telephoto on one body and maybe a wide angle on the other. And that's typically what I do. And I've got a smaller bag that I use for four-wheel drive, and it has a zip at the top. So I can just have it by my feet, have everything closed up, unzip this zip that's across the top of the bag, pull out the body with the wide angle lens on it, take a few shots, and then pop it back in and seal it up again, all the time trying to keep everything covered. So do have a think about the kind of environment you're going to, and think about the kind of issues that you might have to deal with that perhaps you wouldn't normally deal with when you're out taking photographs. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is tripods. So I don't often have a tripod with me. I don't use them a lot, but they're definitely handy. And I use a small Manfrotto. It's their sort of very portable series. It only weighs a kilo. It folds up very small. Obviously, it's not that sturdy. If you're looking for a solid, sturdy tripod, it's probably not the best one to use. And again, obviously with tripods, the way to keep them sturdy is to only use the segments at the very bottom when you have to. So pull that one out last. Use the thicker segments first, because that gives you a sturdier setup on the tripod. However, that tripod is very good. It's got a bull head on it, and that has been useful on occasion. And obviously, if you've got a tripod, particularly one like that isn't that rock solid, I would always take a cable release so that I'm not in danger of just knocking the camera or putting any kind of shake in there. Chances are you've got the tripod because you're doing a long exposure, so the more hands off you are from the camera, the better. Now, the thing that I always recommend to people is get yourself a decent backpack. And by that, I mean something that will carry what you need to carry with you. And that's not just your camera gear, but it might be some water. It might be a rain jacket. It might be just some snacks, depending on what you're doing. But get something that has hip straps. Shoulder straps are okay for short distances, but the kind of photography I do, I quite often end up hiking, sometimes for several hours at a time, maybe 7 or 8 hours. And shoulder straps with any kind of weight just dig into your shoulders and they get very uncomfortable after a while. If you've got hip straps, it puts the weight of whatever's in the bag on your hips, not on your shoulders and your back. And it's far more comfortable. And if you have any kind of back problems as well, that's a much better way to go. Obviously, I'm not giving medical advice here. So if you do have any problems like that, please talk to your doctor, whoever's looking after you. But that's my recommendation. Now, I'm going to talk about clothing because after all, the camera gear, the clothing is quite important too. So first of all, I suppose starting from the bottom, have some decent walking boots. If you're going to be doing any kind of trekking, make sure you've got good quality walking boots. And if they're new boots, I really recommend breaking them in before you go away. So just do hikes for ideally a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months before you go. Make sure you're doing a few hours of walking so that you really get the boots nice and worn in and you're comfortable with them. And then when you're away, you're not going to have to deal with problems with your feet because the boots aren't an ideal fit and all of this kind of stuff. And if you're getting walking boots like that as well, go to somewhere that specializes in that kind of thing. My current boots I bought before I went to Kilimanjaro, and I went to a specialist place in Sydney, and they even had a little kind of wooden slope thing for me to walk up and down just so I could try the boots out in that sort of environment. So do take good care of your feet. It's very hard to walk on them if you don't. And obviously you want to be able to get where you're going without any basic problems like that. So good walking boots, good socks for walking, and for clothing generally, I recommend Icebreaker because I bought a lot of their stuff. You may or may not be able to get hold of their gear. It is a bit more expensive, but I find it really comfortable, very warm when I need warm clothing, and also it's very washable, so it dries. Their clothing dries out very quickly, which is particularly handy if you want to keep how much you're carrying with you down to an absolute minimum. And you might not have much opportunity, it might be an overnight in a hotel. It's great to be able to just rinse shirts and underwear and all this kind of stuff and then let it hang and for it to be dry in the morning, even if it's not particularly warm where you are. So that's my tip on where to get the clothing. Other things, so generally dull colours, particularly if you're photographing wildlife. So greens, beiges, those sort of natural colours. Don't wear any bright colours on you at all. So even small things, try and not have any bright colours on you at all. I like to have long sleeve shirts and full length lightweight shirt and trousers. The reasons again are to keep the sun off me if it's very sunny, because I have quite sensitive skin, so I have to be careful of that. Also, it minimises kind of insect bites and things like that you're likely to get. You don't know what you're going to be brushing against if you're walking through any kind of environments. I was in Uganda in September 2022, and that was walking through forest in the mountains to get to the gorillas. And one of the things they made sure we did was to tuck our trousers into our socks to make sure nothing could get in there, because they do have issues with little critters getting in, so you don't want any of that. Gaiters is another thing to think about if you just want to make sure nothing gets in your boots. So again, have a think about where you're going and what you might need. I do recommend a hat. The best one for me, certainly in sunny conditions, is one of these with a sort of floppy rim, because you can stick them in a bag very easily and you don't have to worry about them getting damaged. But they give shade on the back of your neck and also your ears. So they're definitely a recommendation. The other thing I recommend, particularly if you're going somewhere cold, is one of these. Now, I'm not sure what they're supposed to be called, but it's like a boob tube for your neck, if you know what I mean. It's just a tube. So you can wear it around your neck, and that creates a seal between the clothes around your body and your neck. And I find that's great for just killing that draft that sometimes gets in around the top of your clothing, around your neck. And also, if it's really cold, you can pull it right up over your head, so it's only your face showing. And that's just a great way of staying warm. I did that in India when I was in Kana photographing tigers, because we were up pretty early in the morning and it was very cold first thing in the morning. And that was just a way of staying warm in the car. It was a little open car as well. So you can imagine when we were actually driving, you had quite a bit of wind chill on you. We all would take blankets with us as well. But just having that thing around my head and a hat on top of it just helped keep me warm. So again, have a think about what you're taking with you. Now, I would say rain cover is good. I've got a Gore-Tex raincoat, and I think that's really important to get something that's very good quality. This one definitely was not cheap, but Gore-Tex allows you to breathe, so it does let the moisture out, which is really important, particularly if you're in a colder environment, because the problem when you start to sweat in those environments is that the sweat freezes, and then you've got a real problem. So having a breathable material, and Gore-Tex is probably the best for that, is definitely a recommendation. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is I'll go to the medical stuff. So obviously you need to check out what medication is needed for wherever you're going. If you're going to Central Africa, again, you'll need to check with websites, and your own country should have a website. There's certainly very good ones in Australia, in the UK and in the US on what medication to take. And also talk to your doctor, your physician about what they recommend. They may not know, so it's good to do a bit of homework first. Certainly Central Africa, you will need a yellow fever certificate. They won't even let you in the country without one. So it is really important to make sure you've got the right documentation. As for other things, well, that's between you and your physician. What I would say, if you're going away for an extended period, somewhere where there's malaria, you do need to think about, and again, this is the personal choice, so I'm not offering advice here, but do think about whether or not you want to take malaria medication. The reason I say this is that, first of all, it is quite expensive, but the main reason is that there are side effects with it. And when I was in Southern Africa after about 3 months, and I was kind of on and off the meds, I'm not brilliant at taking meds, but where I knew there was a malaria issue, I would take them. I started to get side effects. I started to get stomach issues with taking the malarial meds. So it's much better to look at prevention, hence long sleeves, full length trousers when you're out. I use sunscreen 50 plus with DEET in it. So that's a way of just keeping particularly mosquitoes away. So have a look at that and see what your options are. And then the final thing is just any other documentation. So I've already mentioned the yellow fever certificate, but then there's the obvious things. Check whether or not you need a visa. Most countries allow you to apply online these days, so it's pretty easy. And just do allow enough time to get all of that organised before you go. One thing to be aware of, if you are applying for a visa, or even if you're going to a wildlife park and they want documentation to let you into the park, and you use your passport, you do need to make sure that when you do turn up at the park to go in, it is the same document. So if your passport is about to expire, or you'll need to replace it before you go, get the replacement first and use that for the visa, park entry, all of those kind of things, because they'll expect to see the same document. If it's a different one, even if it's completely valid, there's a good chance they won't let you in. And obviously you don't want to take that risk, because you don't want to go all that way and then just have a bit of documentation let you down. So that was it, really. I just thought I'd share some ideas. These come from experience. I definitely made mistakes, so hopefully I can help you to not make the same mistakes. And that's really it for this podcast. So I hope you found that useful, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye for now. Oh, and one thing just before you go, please take a look at the 2026 wildlife calendar. That's available now. It's on the website. There's a link below the description of this podcast episode. So please take a look, and I'll speak to you next time. Bye now.